The biggest story in politics right now is corporate lobbying and how it has absolutely destroyed what it means to be a politician in America. There is a reason why every single person is so upset at the current political system. Everybody's looking left and right at each other and looking at each other like we are each the villain, when in reality, it is not the people, it is the politicians, and we have been betrayed by the corporations that me and you consume for products from every single day. And it is time that we address it. In 2024 alone, there was over $4.4 billion spent by corporations on our federal government, lobbying them one way or the other, getting them to pass bills for the corporations and not for the people. And for some reason, the Supreme Court has ruled 5 separate times that corporations have the same rights and campaigns as people, and that the First Amendment not only applies just to me and you, but to corporations worth hundreds of billions of dollars that can influence politicians and sway elections with the snap of their fingers. I'm Tommy Stone, and this is the Tommy Stone Show, and every single day we cover topics like this, so make sure you subscribe if you haven't already, and follow me on TikTok and Instagram at the same handle, The Tommy Stone Show. Thank you guys, and let's get right into it. Being born in Gen Z means there's not a whole lot of political role models that we can look up to and that we can look at and say, hey, have you not been on an island recently? It's really difficult because politics are supposed to be the people that we look up to. And again, I believe this division is the fault of the politicians and not the people. But a group of politicians and a group of people that I still look up to, and I think every American should still read about and embrace their values, are the Sons of Liberty. And the Sons of Liberty were the people who infamously did the Boston Tea Party. And as we all know, the American Revolution. They wrote the Constitution and they changed the world forever, creating the greatest country in the world. And we have to get back to those values of standing up to the people who not only want to oppress our daily lives, they want to take over our political systems, our social systems, our culture, and they want to ruin what it means to be a real American. And today, that villain is the corporations of America. For example, the telecommunications companies. When you look at AT&T, you look at Verizon, combined, they have more lobbyists for the people in Congress than Congress members. That means they have they don't even have a 1-to-1 ratio, again, of people hired just to go lobby Congress. They have a team bigger than Congress, just these two companies alone. Right now, there are tens of thousands of lobbyists that are employed just to go lobby Congress. And the craziest statistic of all time that I think is not talked about enough, in 2024, again, there was over $4 billion spent lobbying our federal government. $4 billion could change a whole lot of people's lives. And I know for sure our politicians are living very, very, very nicely. And not only are they getting paid by the corporations, they're getting paid by the corporations, and then they're investing before they make the laws for the corporations that they know they're going to benefit or hurt. So not only are they getting paid to do us wrong, but they're also investing in making twice as much money as you would think. So politicians are raking it in right now, and that needs to change. That is not what the American system was created to be. If the Sons of Liberty were around today, their sole purpose would be getting corporations out of the political system, getting them out of funding our campaigns and our politicians, and most importantly, ensuring that the First Amendment is only for the American citizen and is not spread across loosely again to corporations like the Supreme Court for some reason has ruled. And in my opinion, the party most at fault is the Supreme Court, and it isn't even close. For some reason, the Supreme Court has allowed corporations not only to take over what the First Amendment means, but they have absolutely destroyed it and the political system. In 2010, it was Citizens United versus the FEC, and that changed everything forever. It happened in 2010, like I said, the Supreme Court ruled 5-4 in favor that corporations and unions can spend unlimited sums of money on independent political parties, campaigns, essentially any sort of political expenditure. And now what's going on is we have the craziest spending we've ever seen in our campaigns, like I said. On top of this, we also had Speech Now versus the FEC that has created super PACs as we know it. Again, you see online all the time people screaming about APAC and what's going on with super PACs and dark money. But again, the Supreme Court has essentially allowed for corporations to be able to come into our elections and destroy them and take over our politicians. What I think is even worse is dark money. What started with under $5 million in 2006 has now exploded to over $1.4 billion in 2026. sorry, 2024. Again, dark money has went from very, very small amounts before the Supreme Court has really allowed it to take over. And again, before these rulings, dark money was a very small part about our campaigns, but now it is almost it has grown exponentially, like I said, from $5 million just 20 years ago in 2006, less than 20 years ago, to over $1.4 billion nowadays. That is absolutely insane. And as we know, we keep finding out more and more every single day about how politicians are getting their money in shady ways. And we are all sick of it. So if I was, again, a son of liberty, nowadays, that would be the number one thing I'm looking at, especially as an American citizen. If I'm getting into politics, which I'm going to be getting into politics soon, the first thing I'm doing is getting these corporations out of our system. When you dive into the numbers and you see which industries are lobbying our politicians the most, it actually gets sickening, because right now, health and pharma overall is the number one lobbyer of our federal government, and they spent over $740 million lobbying the federal government in 2024. And on top of this, again, I mentioned the telecommunications companies and the electronics companies. They have also spent nearly $600 million lobbying our federal government. So just those two industries combined has spent about a quarter of all the lobbying spending that is going on in our federal government. And again, why are these companies spending so much? Again, there's so much regulation and so much money in pharmaceuticals, so that's an obvious one. But telecommunications, Verizon, AT&T, it really doesn't make any sense. But again, that's where we get these crazy conspiracy theories because we have no, sorry guys, we have no transparency about what is going on in our federal government and why these companies are lobbying so much. Again, we've seen huge stock gains across the entire market for all these industries, and these two industries specifically are incredibly volatile right now. But oil and gas as well is another interesting one. Oil and gas has lobbied over $150 million in 2024. However, they're one of the biggest dark money spenders, so we actually probably don't know the true real amount of how much they're spending. Again, oil and gas, that's a very shady industry, but that has also been a very interesting industry for the American person right now. We've had some of the most expensive gas prices we've ever seen in American history, and we've essentially seen no chance of them going down now with the Iran war. So when you take this all into consideration, why has our federal government been acting the way it's been acting the last few years? When you look at the lobbying numbers, it makes a lot of sense. And our system is completely broken because of this. Again, our laws are being written essentially by the corporations, and the regulations are written by the corporations that are supposed to be regulated by the federal government. We no longer have a federal government that is going to regulate a corporation completely unbiasedly. We have the corporations now essentially regulating themselves. And again, when you look into it, in 2003, there was a Medicare Modernization Act that essentially made it so Medicare cannot negotiate drug prices for 20 years. This has been a complete disaster. This is why we've had controversies like Martin Shkreli rising up the cost of AIDS drugs for people. Millions of Americans had to pay quintuple the amount. I think it was actually 10x the amount that they had to pay because he had a complete monopoly on the market. So he raised the price 10 times the amount that it was at before he had the monopoly. So that is the reason why we have this, because Congress has been completely taken over by these corporations, and we have lost what it means to be an American. Again, the First Amendment has been taken over by corporations, and for some reason the Supreme Court has let it happen. I think it's absolutely ridiculous. And again, we have had a ton of opiate deaths over the last, I would say, 25, 30 years. The opioid crisis has really taken off in America. And again, I believe a big reason for that is because we've had almost no regulation, or even if we've had regulation, it is essentially the corporations writing the regulation themselves. And that is why America has had so many random and just unstoppable crises, it seems, because we cannot have politicians that are writing laws for us anymore, or we do not. We do not have politicians writing laws for us anymore. They are writing it for the people that we are trying to stop from destroying society. Also, when politicians and people in the military, once they're done serving our country, they go and work for the companies that they were regulating and writing the laws for. I think it's the most ridiculous thing. This is the most apparent in the military. Right now, I believe it's about 80% of military generals go and work for defense contractors after they're done in the military. I mean, it makes sense to have the experience in that field. Of course, I get it. But I believe it should be a law for politicians specifically that they cannot go work for the exact people and the companies and the firms that they were regulating in the first place and giving them all the tricks and the tips on how to get around regulation. That is the sole reason why these companies are hiring politicians. It isn't for good faith business tactics. I think this needs to be absolutely banned, on top of an amendment going and banning all corporate spending in campaigns. I believe on top of an amendment banning all sort of corporate lobbying, we need to pass a law where people who are in the federal government cannot own any sort of individual stock. Sure, you can buy an ETF, whatever, it doesn't matter. That's just like a normal investor. I really don't like even the idea of that, but I believe that all individual stock cannot be owned by a politician. So there's a lot of things that are going into, again, why this political system is broken. But I think the biggest thing that we have to start doing is regulating and limiting what our politicians can do, who they can get their money from, who they can go work from after this, because there are so many ways that people are being bribed in our system, and it needs to be covered up. On top of this, the Supreme Court has been the people who have been ruling, again, in favor of corporate campaigning and corporate spending in our elections. And they are an unelected position. They do not have to deal with elections and having to deal with the corporations. However, for specifically, again, a Justice Clarence Thomas, one of the most known and the most respected justices in the Supreme Court, has been taking millions of dollars in gifts and essentially bribes for years. But he's been taking millions of dollars in gifts. And again, he's an unelected position. Why is he taking millions of dollars in gifts? We have no idea. And that is the big issue that I have, is every single person in our system is involved with it. I believe the Supreme Court needs a complete look at. We need to fix the Supreme Court. I'm not sure if a lifetime appointment is really the smartest idea in today's generation, where ideas and cultures and things are changing so fast with technology, where a person who's having a lifetime appointment is typically stuck in views that are a little bit too old for modern day America. And that's where we're seeing so much conflict, again, between the politicians and the people. Because, again, not only are we electing people who are too old for us, we're electing people who are not looking at us as people to represent, but they're looking at us as assets. I think it's a long, long road before we get corporate spending and corporate lobbying completely out of our government and out of our campaigns, but I think it can be done, and Gen Z is going to be the generation to do it. We're the most politically independent generation by a mile. I think it's over 50% of us already identify as completely politically independent, and most of us aren't even old enough to understand politics yet, so that number is only going to continue to rise. And as we get older, I believe we are fed up with the system. Older people are getting fed up with the system. Everybody is done, and I believe it starts not by just getting rid of the two-party system, but by fixing the cracks in it right now. And it all starts with by plugging up what corporations can do in politics, and also plugging up what our politicians can do about how they get money, how they get jobs, and essentially how they're regulated and how they're looked at in the terms of corruptness and bribery, because we all know that it needs to be fixed, and that people like Nancy Pelosi can't just be making millions and millions of dollars on the backs of Americans who are struggling. So thank you for watching the Tommy Stone Show today. I really hope you enjoyed today's episode. There's gonna be a ton more content coming out in the next few weeks, so really, please, I beg you, subscribe. It really, really helps me, puts a smile on my face, and helps me keep posting content. So subscribe right now to the Tommy Stone Show on YouTube. Like this video, it really helps. And comment your opinions on everything I said below. But on top of that, for TikTok and Instagram, go follow my handles at the Tommy Stone Show. Again, same as my YouTube. But thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you have a fantastic, fantastic day.